You're listening to Robinson Ventures Radio, where ingenuity meets innovation.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, or wherever you are, whatever time of day it is. Here's our next episode of Robinson Ventures Radio, and I'm very honored to have Kristyn Peck, who is the CEO of the Lutheran Social Services of the National Capital Area Organization. And Kristyn, it's great to have you here today.
Oh, it's so great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you bet. And Melina, who are you and what do you do for LSSNCA?
I am the Director of Communications and Government Relations. I have been with LSSNCA for about a year, and it has been such a pleasure to be on the ground, having come from 10 years of national advocacy work to really be in a place that is doing the work day in and day out has been just so fulfilling for me.
So, Kristyn, talk to me a little bit about who you are. What's your why? What drives you every single day?
So when I was younger, my family moved across the country. We moved 4 times before I was in middle school. So we lived in California, New Jersey, Texas, and then we moved to Maryland. And each time we had to start over. I had to make new friends. I needed to navigate new community norms. Each of those areas of the country are very different. And I had to learn how to let go and adapt and to change. And that has really drawn me to the work of welcome and belonging. I know what it's like to feel like I don't belong in a community or in a school and have to start over. And that's without the added complexities of feeling like my family was forced to flee their home or having to start with a new language and learn a new country and a new culture and customs. And so that's really drawn me to welcome and working with people who've been forced to flee their homes and start over in a new country.
So, Kristyn, your work is refugees, immigrants, as well as other socioeconomic disadvantaged populations that are here in the U.S. Let's come back a little bit further, right? Because you're a MSW, is that right?
I was originally a journalism major in college. I always wanted
Wait, time out. How does one go from journalism to an MSW?
It's a good story.
Okay. Well, do tell.
Yeah, it's a good story. I was a journalism major in college, and my senior year, I was working for a wire service and was sent to the Pentagon on September 11th to get the story. And that was the day that I realized I wanted to be a helper and that was my purpose. I was, interviewing first responders and just felt this disconnect with who I wanted to be. I wanted to be someone helping in a crisis. And so I pursued my master's in social work, and during a internship was placed with an organization that worked with families separated by migration. And that called to me. And my first case right after I graduated was of a young girl who had been sent to the U.S. by her family to reunify with someone who said he was her uncle. And through my assessments and conversations with her and family tracing and trying to put together a family tree, and I learned that he wasn't her uncle, but he was someone that had really bad intentions and wanted to traffic her into sex trafficking. And so I recommended that she not be released to this person. At the time, the U.S. didn't have protections for unaccompanied children if the trafficking had not yet happened, which was her case. She needed to be protected, but the trafficking was disrupted because she wasn't released to the trafficker. And she was deported to France. She was from the Ivory Coast. France was her last point of entry before the United States. She knew no one there. And I think about that case all the time because what it taught me is if I was going to be a social worker, I wanted to be the kind that didn't just help people where they were at and helped equip them with the tools they needed to thrive, but also worked to advance system change so that folks weren't so vulnerable by systems. And following that case, I did a lot of advocacy within the organization I was working on. And the 2008 Trafficking Victim Protection Reauthorization Act protects children like that first child I worked with post-master's degree. And so now a child, if they are vulnerable, if they arrive to the U.S. alone without a caregiver and need a protection, we are able to serve them through a program called the Unaccompanied Refugee Minor Program. And LSSNCA, where I'm currently the CEO, has that program in DC and Virginia. We are able to provide children who arrive to the U.S. alone, seeking protection, safety in loving foster homes while they pursue their immigration case.
Kristyn, how do you do it? How do you do it? For full disclosure, right? The reason we know each other is because of my work on Social Currents board. And you had a question for the CEO, Jody, who I just come on the board and she said, hey, you should go talk to these guys. And so right now we're very blessed. And you and I talk about it all the time. It's a soul fulfilling project that we have with you, right? Which is helping LSSNCA reinvent itself given current economic conditions. I hear these stories that you tell, like I couldn't do it. Like I would be an absolute mess.
My team, our leadership team and I, we all feel deeply connected to the mission of the organization. And our own purpose is aligned with the mission of LSSNCA, which is an enduring mission. It's always been, we're guided by our values of the inherent dignity of all people. We have a vision of creating thriving communities. And we do that in and with communities. The work that we do would not be possible if it weren't for the welcoming and supportive communities that wrap around the people that we serve and that we're able to mobilize so that the folks who we are welcoming, who are starting their lives over, have that sense of belonging in their new community. These are people who their belief in our mission is unshakable. And even when we go through tough times as an organization where we have constrained resources, it's this community that has shown up time and time and again for the people that we serve and for LSSNCA. And that's through their volunteer efforts, it's through donations, their work to welcome newcomers, to welcome the stranger.
We talk about this in healthcare all the time. How do you align your connected purpose with the organization's mission, vision, values, define that why and execute on it in a culturally competent and transparent organizational culture, right? And so what you just described was that for LSSNCA and for yourself. Okay, so talk to us about LSSNCA. I mean, 107 years? How old now is this?
Yeah, we're 108 years old. We were developed by 7 Lutheran congregations in the DC metro area who wanted a Lutheran social ministry. Although we have deep origins in the Lutheran Church, we serve everybody. We have a very diverse team that's representative of the communities we serve. And our journey has always been about faith and community and how can we serve the most vulnerable and at the same time advance change, programmatic change, policy change. So we are changing the conditions that make folks vulnerable. And from our origin story, we've always been nimble and responding to the current needs. We assisted folks impacted by the Great Depression, providing direct assistance through the years, responded to different refugee flows. We served our first unaccompanied refugee child in the 1970s, Cambodian child who needed a medical procedure. And we worked with our community to raise funds for that medical procedure so that he could survive and placed him in a foster home. And this is all work we continue today. We provide that welcome and support. We provide foster care to children who arrive alone. And we really provide wraparound support, employment, health navigation, mentoring, legal services, mental health, case management, all with the aim to help people adjust to their new communities and thrive and rebuild their lives.
And so talk to us a little bit about the last few years. I mean, I'm privy to know that there was this massive influx of refugees over the past 4 years, right? Mostly attributed to Afghanistan and Ukraine, right? And some other areas of the country. And then there's a pivot in policy, and that has dried up. Right now, you're in the midst of that, right? Talk to us about sort of the buildup and then now where you're thinking about taking the organization.
It's been a dizzying 4 years, I guess might be the word. We, in 2021, we had been serving about 500 a year. And then when we learned that the U.S. government would be evacuating Afghans who had assisted U.S. missions and whose lives were therefore at risk by the Taliban. We said, we want to help. You know, many of the folks who we'd been welcoming in previous years had arrived as Afghan special immigrant visa holders. They were working alongside the U.S. military and U.S. missions, and their lives were at risk. And so we said, how can we help with this massive evacuation? And the evacuation was accelerated when Kabul was seized by the Taliban in August of 2021. And so that meant what was a planned, managed evacuation, as you all may remember, happened very quickly. And we all watched on TV as, Afghan families left their homes and made it to the airport and were fleeing for their lives to make it on these planes to the U.S. And because Northern Virginia is one of the areas we serve, and Northern Virginia is the third largest destination in the U.S. for Afghans, we knew that many would be arriving. And at this point, they weren't eligible for federal benefits or services. And so we put a call out to our community and said, we will be serving Afghan allies. We think it's our moral responsibility to welcome and care for those who worked alongside us for so long in Afghanistan, and therefore our lives are at risk. We went from serving 500 people a year to 500 people a month overnight. When Afghans began arriving at bases, and at the local airport was Dulles Airport, they would leave on their own and come to us. We have a reputation within the Afghan community, both in Afghanistan and in the DC metro area. We're well known for serving Afghans. We had the first 12 we served. There were people who were medically fragile. There was a pregnant woman, a man who was diabetic. There was someone with high blood pressure, and they all were without medication and need urgent medical treatment. We did that through partnership. We partnered with local federally qualified health centers. We needed to enroll lots of children in school quickly, and they all needed immunizations. So we partnered with Children's Hospital and Neighborhood Health, and they provided weekend immunization clinics, volunteering all day to make sure that the kids were immunized and could start school as soon as possible. We went from serving 500 people a year to 500 people a month overnight, and we could not have done that without our community partnerships and volunteers and donors. I remember putting a call out to our community and saying, the folks who are arriving have nothing but the clothes that they had on their back when they left their homes for the airport. They had no time to prepare. We need clothing. We need household supplies. We need furniture. Amazon trucks began arriving in our offices, which were all in local churches, every hour on the hour. And there were so many donations. They were leaving our offices as quickly as they were coming because people needed them. But I remember we were working under towers of boxes. And so then I put a call out to volunteers and said, we need help inventorying the donations, and people helped us do that. It was really what we saw from our community was a surge of compassion, and it crossed all lines you can imagine. And it was because of them that we served 4,500 Afghan allies that fiscal year. And then in the years following, we began to build out services, what I call the long welcome, beyond that initial resettlement. How can we make sure people are integrating into their local communities, that they have gainful employment, that they are becoming recertified in the career paths they have in their home country, that they have treatment, culturally responsive treatment to help them process their trauma, that their adjustment, their legal status and adjustment is being taken care of so they're not at risk of being deported back to Afghanistan. So we built service lines in mental health and in legal services, and we enhanced our employment services. Shortly thereafter, Russia invaded Ukraine, and we began starting over with that process to welcome Ukrainians who are arriving to the community. Since 2021 has really been about building up our capacity to respond to these large humanitarian crises, and building services to provide the long welcome to our new neighbors. But then we saw a shift at the beginning of this year with the change in administration and different philosophy on the work of welcome and the work of refugee resettlement. The refugee resettlement program was suspended the first week of the inauguration. We were required to put an immediate stop to that work. We had welcomed 400 people, nearly 400 people in the 3 months prior to the inauguration. And we're told we were no longer able to spend the funds that we had planned for rent for basic needs. We've turned to our community. We've asked for their help. They've showed up for us time and again with volunteering, walking alongside our new neighbors and helping them acclimate to their new communities. We also saw that to sustain the work and to continue our mission, that we needed to change the way that we fund the work that we do. And that's where we reached out to Robinson Ventures to help work alongside us to develop a more sustainable funding model, looking at how can we continue to carry out our legacy of welcome and supporting neighbors in the DC metro area. How can we do that for the next 100 years? And how can we do it in a way that's more sustainable? So we're not growing drastically and then shrinking dramatically.
You put together a formal RFP process, right? You respond to that RFP, and then you said, yes, you're it. And we were very excited, right? And then we got in there and we started understanding what was going on. And I don't care if you're a non-for-profit or you're a startup or you're a mature company, right? When you depend upon a singular entity or revenue stream too much, you put yourself at risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a cautionary tale for everyone. Like I joke around, Blockbuster, right? We could have invested in Netflix. Well, guess what? Netflix killed Blockbuster, right? We're also now seeing that in the non-for-profit world, and specifically in the welcome economy that you ran, right? What was brilliant was when we realized that you were so singularly dependent upon a particular revenue stream. The thing was we also saw you had built capacity, and you maybe didn't realize it because you were in the midst of serving 500 people a month. Then you're building out capacity. And then what we realized was, oh my goodness, like they have an entire legal department that's running in there. Oh my goodness, they have an entire behavioral health clinic that's running in there. And all of a sudden there were things in these areas where we were like, hey, if we can just shift our mindset a little bit into how do we be innovative and entrepreneurial, we can create sustainability going forward by figuring out how to not only fulfill mission, vision, and values, but also monetize that capacity.
That's why we selected Robinson Ventures. We needed help thinking outside the box. We needed to diversify our revenue model, which was very dependent on government partnerships. And we need to be able to make our own money so that we could continue to support the good work that we're doing. And by launching, as you're sharing about our thrift store, the thrift store will allow us to be able to continue providing goods, clothing, basic needs items to people in need for free, because we're able to earn our own income to support that mission. If we are able to provide legal services for a fee for people who can afford to pay that fee, that will subsidize legal services for folks who are not able to pay that fee. Our team right now, our legal team, is doing Know Your Rights presentations for communities that are in need of those presentations because they're being targeted by immigration enforcement. And they are partnering with the Capital Area Food Bank to provide food at the same time, because those are the very same people also experiencing food insecurity in this moment. But we can only do that work if we have the revenue to support it. And so that's why it's important that we are launching these initiatives where we're able to just think more entrepreneurially about the work that we're doing. When we have community members that are able to pay for legal services, they're helping someone else out. When we have community members that buy things from our thrift store, by doing so, helping a family in need shop that same thrift store for free. When folks are paying for mental health services, again, in doing so, it's a different way of contributing to our mission.
And it doesn't mean you've gotten away from the welcome economy at all. I mean, it's still core to who you are. It's now just a different way to serve. And what we've talked about internally, I think, how do you think through a third, right? A third earned income, a third philanthropic, right? And then a third contractual obligations, grants and or contracts from federal or state entities or other organizations, local, DC, right? And that's not going to happen overnight. Plan the work and work the plan. And right now the plans have come together, and in many instances we're working those plans, and in particular launched legal, That was already in progress before we even got here, right? Thrift store. We're all crossing fingers that that's going to launch soon too. And so the one that we're excited about is the ability to offer behavioral health and mental health services. And my goodness, the need for behavioral health services within the child and family and adult in DC is absolutely astronomical. It's not going to be perfect. There are going to be hiccups and burps. We're going to then have the mindset of how do we overcome them as well.
I think that there's a lot of similarities between what we are doing when we help new Americans rebuild, start over, adjust, adapt to the work that we're doing as an organization. We're having to pivot, we're having to rebuild, we're having to adapt to a new environment to ensure ability to be able to carry out this century-old mission for people who need it. The skills that we are teaching newcomers at a client level are the same skills that we are applying at this more macro level.
Physician, heal thyself, right?
Yeah.
One of those sort of serendipitous collisions that occurred is part of my contract is, or our contract, Robbins Ventures, is we have to come on site on a quarterly basis. And the last time I came on site was the beginning of October. And I land at the airport and I order my Uber, right? And my Uber is going to take me to my hotel. And I'm in the Uber and the gentleman driving me had been serviced by LSSNCA and began to just talk about the importance to him and his son in the services that they receive. And he went down the path of how he and his son are very entrepreneurial in nature. This kid had a side hustle while he was going to high school, and he was working on different projects within not only his own community, but in the DC proper. Dad drove Uber, but then dad also did like 2 or 3 other things. I say this from the perspective of being half Italian. My family had the little grocery store in the little town that they grew up in, and they ran it for not only everybody in, then they also ran it for their own community. And so it just seems to me a really neat confluence of when you're able to think through and truly believe that entrepreneurship, and in particular within refugee and immigrant communities, is so vital and important. And I want to know your thoughts on that.
Oh, absolutely. When I think about how do we know that we're successful, like the collective we, in the work of welcome, I think about in Northern Virginia, there is a shopping center, and it's in 7 Corners, and it's all Vietnamese restaurants.
It's nothing like a good pho, right?
That is my comfort food of choice.
Tucker got to learn all about pho when we moved to all places, Louisiana.
Oh, really?
There is a huge Vietnamese population there, and they work oil and gas in the fishing industry, and they self-bank. I mean, talk about entrepreneurial. But the moment I got there, I was like, I haven't had good pho since I left New Jersey, New York City area. And I was finally here. And then we went and found our 2 favorite locations. And we went to Pho Saigon and Saigon Noodle were the 2 places we were like, at least there once a week. And when you got sick, you got to go get pho. Just saying.
Yeah. But I agree. And when I think about, the Eden Center, and I think about that thriving community of these Vietnamese restaurants, and those business owners came over in the 70s, I think it's indisputable that makes our community better. Everyone references that area in Northern Virginia. It's on every list of, where to eat if you're visiting the area. To be a part of that journey for a newly arriving refugee or immigrant is it's a real honor and a real privilege. And one of the things that we've done and look forward to also exploring with Robinson Ventures is support refugees on their path to entrepreneurship. And so we've had this program. We partnered with George Mason University for the past 2 to 3 years. And we have a cohort of about 40 folks each year who enter that program. It's called SOAR. Maybe they have their own business in their home country and need some support and assistance and guidance in how to do that here. Or maybe they just have a dream. And it's been a really cool experience to be able to support them in the launching of their own businesses. And I know that part of the vision of our thrift store is to have a maker space.
Yeah, 100%. 100%, Kristyn.
Same idea, cultivating the gifts that refugees bring and helping them pursue their dreams and providing a launch pad, in a sense, for them to do that.
What I'm looking forward to, and you and I have talked about this, everybody thinks, oh, thrift store you go in, right? And what's great is Gen Zs and some millennials, they're huge thrifters. Like there's, we've been doing the research on the thrifting economy, and then there's also ThredUp. And so to me, the thrift store becomes also a platform from which we can help these folks not only sell perhaps at the thrift store itself, also in these online venues where we can help them monetize what they're doing in their business, right? Whether it's they're a maker and they're creating, I forget who was showing me when we were on the onsite last time, these phenomenal, I think somebody's wearing some phenomenal silk scarf or something like that. It was made by a LSSNCA client, right? And so it's like, okay, how do you help these folks use this as that platform? Well, I think we're calling it dignity.
Yeah.
There is dignity in work. There is dignity in entrepreneurship, right? I'm excited. I'm excited about that opportunity to work that.
I'm excited about that too. And for anyone who's been to our resource center before, they'll see the level of quality that we have and the items that we have there. And, our resource center manager, part of what she has sold is a dignified shopping experience.
Yes.
And so we have a team of volunteers that work alongside our very lean LSSNCA staff at that resource center / soon to be thrift store to make each experience for people entering the door one that's positive and one that's welcoming. And I know that we'll be able to continue that when we transition to this new model.
So Kristyn, I got two more questions. The easier one is for those who are listening, how can they help?
Well, visit our website. It's LSSNCA.org. There are so many ways to help. I will say we will always accept your money and we'll put it to good use. We know how to stretch a dollar. We have clean financial audits. You can find all of our information on our website. We're very transparent. Your money will go to good use, and it will go to things like supporting some of these new initiatives, ensuring that we have, for example, a fund to pay for legal fees. Maybe we're providing the service, but the legal fees are quite costly. So that's an example. Could go for emergency food for folks, or depending on the need, support some of the things we're doing to stabilize the organization and grow. We are always looking for volunteers. Volunteers do things like sort donations at our resource center and at soon to be Dignity Thrift. They help clients shop our donations. We always are looking for mentors. We have programs that provide foster care to unaccompanied children. We're always in need of foster parents. And then we're looking for volunteers always to help our new neighbors find jobs. And so that might be through interview practice. It might be through reviewing their resume. It might be helping them set up a LinkedIn profile. I would say donations, volunteers, foster parenting. And then I would also just add, if you look at our website, items that we need most at our resource center, we're always looking for in-kind donations of goods, whether that's new or gently used clothing or household supplies or baby items. Those items are always in high demand.
Apparently, I've learned men's clothing, because apparently we wear it until it has holes all through it. And then when we donate it, it actually has to go to the rag bag. Right.
That's right. Women also seem to turn over their closets much more frequently than men. So we always have an abundance of women's clothing. We still want your women's clothing, but we do need men's clothing.
And so I promise that I will have to go through a refresh soon in my closet. Instead of flying, maybe one time I'll take the 6-hour drive up and just go straight to the resource center and unload the back of my car.
Every time I go to the resource center, I put a call out to my neighborhood. And the night before I drive to each house, and my car is always packed. And the joke in my neighborhood is we have the best service for the LSS Resource Center. The CEO does hand deliveries.
Well, in our household, it's the president of the university, right? So we've got a very similar setup. All right, final question. What is one question that I should have asked you, but I didn't?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll say we're always looking for new partnerships. So I talked a bit about how individuals become involved in the work. We're also looking for partnerships, and whether that's federally qualified health centers for us to partner with and explore new ways that we could impact the community together. How can we partner? We're doing a lot of work right now with the National Capital Area Food Bank to make sure that the refugee and immigrant community in need gets the food that they need. We're always interested in corporate sponsors. We have this lovely resource center that is becoming Dignity Thrift that could use some corporate sponsorships. And then I would also say law firms. Law firms would be another partnership that we would be interested in. We do clinics, for example, to help. We do pro se asylum clinics, for example, and that's a way that we could partner with law firms. It's not been an easy year for LSSNCA or many social service agencies and in general. And so we found ourselves really thinking about how can we deepen our community partnerships? How can we maximize our impact by working with others that have some shared missions, shared interests? How could we do more together to meet the needs of our community at this time?
Melina, I know we haven't called your name out. Should have asked a question that I haven't asked yet? Is there information you want to get out there?
You covered a lot. I will just add that really there is nothing too big or too small that like everyone can do something. Like there is a role everyone in that community can play, whether it's LSSNCA or not. There's always local regional agencies that need to be supported. If you're in the DMV or want to partner with us, we are here. We are ready. And so that will be what I'll add.
Well, Kristyn and Melina, thank you very much for spending your afternoon with us, for us to learn more about you and LSSNCA and the absolutely mission critical work that you're doing in the welcome economy and bringing our friends here to the United States.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and we're just grateful to be able to share about the work we do. And thank you for your partnership in helping us sustain this important work.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.